This actually started back in 2020, I believe it was, when it was reduced, the acreage was reduced. We get a lot of calls from folks, of course, wanting to do developments in the city. A lot of times they're great developments, but unfortunately, the current ordinance doesn't allow it, so that's why it's being brought back to the commission for consideration. And so now I'll turn it back over to Ms. Jennifer.
Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, I thank everybody for coming out for this workshop. This is meant to be an education more than anything. We're not voting on anything tonight. This all started several months ago. For me, I had several folks in my district that owned acreage that was less than 20 that had planned on developing it, but when the acreage was increased in the October BOC meeting to 20 acres, they were disheartened to hear that and had hopes of getting some reconsideration given the comments that were made in that BOC meeting that it would circle back potentially to a new BOC meeting if there were new elected officials on the board. So I took the initiative to bring that forward several months ago. Did come with, I guess, a great deal of controversy for what reasons I have no idea, but I ended up deferring that first reading to January of 2021. So that's the background. My full intentions on this is to allow for small parcels of land, and specifically in pockets throughout Mount Juliet, to get developed. These are areas that would typically be underdeveloped, and give those projects an opportunity to be seen by the Planning Commission first and foremost, and then as all multifamily developments are required to do, come in as a PUD. So that would also face the scrutiny of this board. So that was my intention, is to bring more projects forward under RM8. This is specifically to RM8. Jennifer Hamill will get into the details and specifics of what that means compared to RS16. I want to just kind of go over a few things here. We're kind of as we're going to kind of work through this. It's an open discussion, but I want to start with just providing a history or timeline. Kenny kind of touched on it. We have some exhibits up here that we're going to go through. This is not, my point in this is not something that Scott Hefner just all of a sudden rolled out of bed and said, I want to do. This is something that's been discussed going back to actually 2018. So we're going to go through that. This is not something that I just dreamt up. So we're going to go through the history and the timeline. I'm going to ask Ms. Hamlin to come up and talk about the differences between RM8, RM16, the process that a developer has to go through to get those projects approved. In the cases, in most cases, if not all cases, you'll find out that anywhere where we have land between 10 and 20 acres is going to require a land use amendment. So she'll discuss the details about that. So the entire process we're going to walk through. Also, I'm going to bring in some subject matter experts local to this area. I'm going to thank Will Smith from Beazer Homes. He's going to speak. Mr. Robinson, Bill Robinson, is going to come up representing local developer. Matt Gardner, who is one of the principals of Venice Station North, who actually builds apartment complexes. He's going to speak to the economics around building apartment complexes and the feasibility or the lack thereof under RM8 on 10 acres of land. And then finally, we're going to talk to, I don't know if Andy Barlow's here, we're going to talk to the Public Works. Is Andy not here?
No, but I think he intends on
Okay.
being here.
And then we'll talk about from a planning standpoint, and then also finish up with Public Works comments. So that's kind of how the flow of the conversation, the agenda is going to go. I encourage all the members of this board to ask questions, both of the subject matter experts or myself. I'm happy to go through it. So, did I miss anything? Is that good? Okay. All right. With that being said, Ms. Hamlin, if you don't mind,
Sure, you want
coming
to
in,
start
we'll
with your timeline?
start with the timeline
Okay.
and kind of go through a little bit of the history and how we
I
got.
actually have copies of the timeline if anybody would like to have one. They're just right here. You're welcome to come up and get one so you can follow along. We did actually leave off where this originated, and that was in October of 2019. And Commissioner Franklin at the time requested staff to research the minimum acreage requirements for multifamily as a result of the Hibbett Station development. I have a copy here. You're welcome to look through that, but I need it back. The reason that he had such a issue with this project wasn't due to the acreage exactly. It was due to the lack of improved open space requirements for this development. So he asked staff to poll other cities for their minimum acreage requirements. We polled Gallatin, Hendersonville, Brentwood, Franklin, and we found that there were no minimum acreage requirements for apartments in those surrounding communities. So we felt like 10 acres was a good start, and requested 10-acre minimum, I believe was our original request, and 20% open space. So that hit our December 2019 Planning Commission agenda, where it was deferred, and ultimately in January of 2020, it was given a positive recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. At that time, it was deferred at February 10th, 2020. It was deferred unanimously by the Board of Commissioners here, and ultimately approved in October of 2020. And that was for a 10-acre minimum gross area and 10% improved recreational open space. Mayor Haggerty at the time, as that was one of the last meetings under that original BOC before the election and the new started, he asked that we hear this again sometime in the future once you guys felt comfortable with it as a new commission. So that was ultimately passed October 26, 2020, and it started originally with Mr. Franklin in October of 2019.
Okay. All right.
Did anybody have any questions on the timeline? Do you want a copy? I have copies. Sure. Okay.
I do have a question as it relates to the 10 acres. Do you recall what made that the magic number? Why was it not 20 acres back in 19? Why was it?
I just think that that's something that John and I felt was a good starting point. We looked at the available lots within the city and felt like that was just a number that we wanted to start with. There weren't very many over 10 acres that were available, and we didn't want to necessarily stop those multifamily developments coming in altogether, but wanted to make it manageable and where they could have appropriate open space and still come in with smaller numbers. For instance, Hibbett Station is 60 units. The Lebanon Road Retail, which is where Putt-Putt is, it's 48 units. So those smaller unit numbers is what we were looking for.
Okay.
I mean, if you were to double that, you would have double the units. So
Right.
we were just trying to keep that unit count as small as we could.
Okay, great. And I got to ask, what's your opinion on it today? I mean,
Well, I actually like the RM16 20-acre minimum, but I don't necessarily have an issue with the 10 acres on the RM8, just because if you do look at Hibbett Station, and it was a fight for us to get those improvements, and I think our planning commission did a really good job with that. But now that we have that 10% open space requirement, I think that that's more manageable, and the developers definitely know our expectations on improvements for open space. So
Okay.
I have this plan here if anybody wanted to look at it. I think it's a great development, 60 units,
okay,
and we're just trying to keep that unit count smaller.
okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions on the timelines? I mean, does that seem, okay. Sorry, I'm going to have you roll on here. So we're going to move over and talking about the PUD process. What is the land use? What's a land use amendment? RM8, what is that? What is
Sure.
RM16? So if you don't mind indulging us in a little education on that,
Sure.
that would be great.
So the future land use plan is literally that, a map and a written text of the city's future idea of how the city should develop. So that's usually a committee is formed and then ultimately voted on by the planning commission, and they hold the control of that document. So in order to amend that it's technically not supposed to be a living document. We rarely change or amend the land use plan. They make application to the planning commission for that land use plan amendment. So it's basically a document or a guide to development within the city limits and our urban growth boundary.
Okay, thanks. And how easy or difficult is it to get a land use
I
amendment?
rarely support a land use amendment. Very rarely do I support the land use plan because that is what we are to use as a guide for development. And again, it's not supposed to be a living document. Should it ever need to be changed, then I feel like we should open a committee and change the whole thing rather than parcel at a time, because that's just not smart development, in my opinion.
Can you walk us through this?
Sure. I won't be heard, just so you know, on the recording. That's okay.
Okay.
So, what do you?
Well, so these are all vacant tracts between 10 and 20 acres,
Correct.
correct?
And most all of them you see are medium density residential. So I'm not seeing any vacant parcels in the area of 10 to 20 acres that already have the land use designation of multifamily. There are none. That's both our UGB and the city limits. There are some, that's high density, so we're looking for multifamily. So there are some mixed-use parcels in which those would be allowed, but that would also have to incorporate commercial use within those
Okay.
developments.
So effectively, every RM8 would come in with a land use amendment.
Correct. There are no available
Which that
parcels.
is a hurdle in and of
Correct.
itself.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
RM16, because I know that is also,
Sure. RM16 is basically a development with 16.1 units per acre. That's your typical apartment style community. And the density for that is 16.1 units per acre.
do we currently have any apartment complexes that were built under RM8?
We do not.
So there's been no apartment complexes
No apartment complexes
built under RM8? So they've been built, they were built under RM16?
Correct. Or a CMU PUD,
Okay,
that commercial mixed-use PUD. For instance, Providence Central that was a CMU PUD. They follow that density of the 16.1 units per acre, but the zoning is actually CMU.
right. Because it's 8 units per acre.
For RM8,
For
it's
RM8.
7.9 units per acre.
Yeah, and 16.1
16.1,
per acre.
correct.
Even though the RM doesn't designate whether it's apartments or townhomes,
It does not.
it restricts the number of units that can be built per acre.
Yes, sir.
And we'll get into the economics of why we have not seen an apartment complex built under RM16 a little bit later on. And you don't have to spend a whole lot of time on this. You spoke to the land use amendment process. That has to go before the planning commission and has to be approved, which is rarely is. Can you talk about what a PUD is?
Sure, a PUD
and
is
what
a
that means?
A planned unit development, and that is an overlay district. I always refer to Mr. Franklin's little add to his description. Planned unit development is basically a tug of war between the city and the actual developer. We have requirements and expectations that we already have in place within our ordinance, but then there are also opportunities for the city to ask for other things during those developments. For instance, off-site road improvements or on-site improvements. So that's basically, a PUD is an overlay district that depicts, what the open space requirements are, density is your underlying zoning. It requires a recommendation from the Planning Commission and 2 readings from the Board of Commissioners.
And it also includes a voluntary fee that goes towards off-site improvements?
It does not in our ordinance.
Not in the
That is
ordinance.
one of the things that you guys
So thank you for
usually
correcting
seek
me
as
on that.
part of the
So most PUDs will carry with it an
per
off-site.
lot contribution.
Per
yes,
lot
sir.
contribution, so,
But it is not in the zoning ordinance, therefore staff does not request that.
okay, and it is law. a PUD becomes an ordinance
Yes,
in and of
it is a law.
itself, so it is a law. So restrictions can be placed on PUDs such as, and we've done this on this board, we've restricted rental units, or the number of rental units that can be owned by individuals and corporations.
Correct.
So, if a apartment complex did come in as a PUD, we could, in theory, restrict the number of units that could be, well, if a townhome development came in as a PUD, we could restrict the number of units that could be owned by an individual, as we have done. And we have done that. So we're not creating these neighborhoods of rental communities. So, okay. So that covers that. I want to just hit the pause button, see if anybody's got any questions, comments. Yeah.
So, Ms. Hamlin, hopefully this is good enough. So, because I know you and I have talked about this right here when it comes to Hickory Stations. We were able to look that up, and that's an RM16. Now, those are condos, those are not apartments, but as you know, and as a lot of folks here that live in that area know, that that's a big issue. So what are some recommendations that you would see from your team moving forward to help eliminate some of those parking issues, the small garages that are mainly sheds?
Well, we do have those
Yeah.
items in our ordinance now to take care of those issues. I mean, that's definitely a stepping stone for us to see. The difference between Hickory Station townhomes is that was all originally approved in the county.
Okay.
And we acquired it from them. So we have a minimum 440 square foot for a garage. I mean, we have all those, ordinances in place now to take care of the consumer on the end for those less than garages. I mean, you're right, they're closets.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a proposal now that is trying to cement 10-foot long, driveways. It's just completely not acceptable, so.
Okay. And then my
Yeah.
second part, because I know with this past Thursday, there was some discussion for some other projects that, again, we see families now that have, husband, wife, or two,
Driving children.
two driving children, family of four, basically. I'm actually in that same boat. My garage is, even though it's a two-car garage, it's more of a, I would say like a play storage area for
Right.
kids' stuff, between the three kids, and then, of course, 4 cars in the driveway. And it's just, it's a nightmare. So is there anything that you would recommend for if the city does look at going to a new version of, some of these new requirements? Is there anything that your team would be looking for, as in if we do apartments, because we are running into the townhomes up there in Hickory Hills, which is in my district. And right now, we're seeing families that are moving in that are either not familiar with the city's requirements, which is parking on the road. Their driveways are short. Now, could you confirm or not, was Hickory Hills townhomes, were they annexed in, or were those already meeting the city requirements?
They were annexed in, I believe, in 2001.
Okay, and then the
And they
second.
were approved through the city ultimately on final master development plans. However, we did not have the ordinances in place that we do now. For instance, the length for a driveway now is 22 feet long. So those driveways would definitely not be acceptable, nor would the ones over in Mount Juliet Commons. They're very small driveways, but we do not allow that under our current ordinance.
And how do we help manage these property management companies? Obviously, our goal is not to manage any of these things, but when it comes down to our citizens that are moving in, they're obviously looking for, visitor parking. And that usually visitor parking turns into a resident parking.
It does.
So-
Hopefully with our, like I said, our ordinances with the 22-foot long driveways, the 440 square foot of clear space in the garage, as well as those additional parking spaces. I mean, that's the same for a single-family residential development as well, so.
And then how
we're
will
not
we
having
look?
any problems, I don't think, out of the single-family.
Sure.
Under those same regulations.
And then the apartments, if, let's just say, for example, we start having projects that are developed in here that come in as, wanting to look at small apartments, is that something that, again, what are some of the requirements? Again, so we
The
have it in.
requirements for multifamily is, for a one-bedroom is 1.5 parking spaces, and for 2 bedrooms and more, it's 2 spaces. 90% of the time that we see an apartment come through here, it's grossly overparked.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
No further questions.
Good questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and bring up some of our, I call them industry experts, subject matter experts. Will, you mind going first? Will Smith, Beezer Homes. He's going to speak to from a home builder's perspective, and a company that builds townhomes and single-family homes throughout the country. Speak a little bit to your background experience, the demographics, who's actually buying townhomes, things of that nature, anything that would be relevant to.
Absolutely. I appreciate y'all having me up. Every time I get up here, my normal is saying my name and address, and so it's a little different now. But to kind of give you a background of some of the things that we're seeing, not just on the I guess the financial side, but also the demographics that we're seeing in the area. Obviously we have one community, which is Wintry, that has some townhomes that are isolated in the core of that community. And as we've seen the single-family prices continue to increase here in, especially in Mount Juliet, we've seen those over the last 4 years go from the low 4s, and now they're creeping up in the upper 6s, lower 7s.
Is that for an entry level?
That's for a single. That's the average single-family home.
It's in the 600,000 in Mount Juliet.
It is. So affordability has become a bit of an issue for the first-time home buyer that we see that want to be in the market. They want to be in the community. They're from here, or they're moving out of the downtown life, which is that specific buyer. As we look at affordability, one of the things that they're looking at, quality of life, which Mount Juliet has. The second is really the price tag, and that price tag of where townhomes are now are in the $350 to $425 range, and that's what you would see as an average townhome price in the Mount Juliet market. So, that's a pretty large price tag for a first-time home buyer. I mean, given where the single family is, that naturally would be where your first-time home buyer would come in. The other demographic that we continue to see is the move-down buyer, the one that has had the large house that kids have moved out, or empty nesters. They don't want the upkeep of a single-family home. They don't want to mow the yard. The HOA takes care of it. And so they're in that financial position. It's a little bit different on design of those townhomes. Those are more of a master on the main floor, which is going to be a little bit wider of a townhome. But those are the things that we continue to see, and obviously the opportunity, if it would come up here in Mount Juliet, would be a great market for those. I guess the adage of what we've always seen is that townhome communities, you're always looking at the price and the demographics that are going to be in there, but given where the price tag is today, and especially when the HOA maintains that community, they will be nicer communities. When it comes to RM8, it's rare with the type of townhome that we would have here, the garage setbacks and the architectural requirements that are already in place, that we would be able to get more than the 7.9 an acre under the RM8. We couldn't, if we tried, to get it under RM16. That would be a really hard. We could try, but we couldn't get the max on the 16, and I don't think the architectural requirements would allow us to get that far anyway. So, that's kind of what we look at in the zoning when we're talking about And if I say it wrong, I think it's RM8, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So we would be maxing out under that RM8 with the type of townhome that would be required here.
Okay. All right.
So I have a question, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, obviously, if the market right now is hitting at 350 to 425 is what you were thinking for townhomes roughly, is that for a two-bedroom, three-bedroom?
For us, it would be more of a 3-bedroom. There's a couple options to do a couple masters in there to do a two-bedroom, but primarily 3-bedroom with a master down.
So, I mean, could you hit on some really good key points, by the way, when it comes to, first-time home buyers, and obviously, the market's great here, and the reason why the market's so good here is because of our schools, which is a big concern of mine, because again, we're overpopulating. I'm hearing from teachers, parents, that, again, I think this is more of the other side of the Board of Education. He needs to be able to listen in on these meetings to be able to keep up with the future growth. But, if we're trying to hit that market of first-time home buyers, and $425,000 as a first-time home buyer, that's pretty expensive. It really is. But at the same time, my concern is that as the developers, they see, okay, what's the price of land? What's the cost of material? What's the market? Inflation. So all these things are taken, in factor, and a lot of these folks that are moving back, they want that country feel. That's what Mount Juliet was always, remembered. I've never been here, my whole life, but all the folks that have been here, that's been here their whole life, they want that country feel. And if we take these small plots out and basically turn them into small little condos or townhomes or apartments, we lose that country feel, and then that market no longer, it's just a, what I told some folks when I first moved here, which everyone tends to laugh about. And again, when I say this, it's no disrespect to anybody, but Antioch, everybody talks about how great Antioch is, how it was. They were like the best place. And again, I'm not from here, so I don't see the good, the bad, whatever, but I just hear about those things. And that's one thing as for me to get up here and to talk about it is how do we keep that from happening? And if we start to look at, changing the urban growth and so forth, and we need a commission to do that, do we even look that far into the future? So, but my biggest concern, I guess, with the developers, there's a lot of them in here that are really excited about this topic. My biggest concern is that profit, as in, are we really feeding that first-time home buyer? Or are we just saying, hey, you know what, there's a lot of empty space, we need to fill it. Let's go ahead and put on a pitch here. So there's just, again, what's the agenda? Is the agenda to really backfill the first-time home buyer and give them a good product for a good price? Or are we just trying to hit a market? So, and that's for everybody that's out here. That's what I see it as. So I'm concerned as a citizen and as just moving here for the past, 9 years? I'm excited about this city. I love this city. And, my son's born here, so, I'm kind of like a half Tennessean, I guess is the best way to put it. So, anyways, that's what I'm going to be asking you folks as folks are coming up tonight to think about these things. How do we make sure that we, capture that feeling and that capture the, the Mount Juliet, history. So, thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it.
Will?
I do want to address one oh, sorry, Mayor.
You said Wintry, you were referring to Wintry Pines, not Wintry Trace.
Wintry Pines, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if anybody hears from Wintry Trace, there's no townhomes going to appear in there, but
No.
yet.
So it's Wintry Trace or Pines?
It's Pines.
Okay. I'm writing that down because I actually took notes to look that up.
So, appreciate it, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
And I did want to address a comment that you made about townhomes, condos, and somehow having that some detrimental effect on Mount Juliet. First, by increasing or lowering the minimum property size, you're not going to stop that from happening.
Sure.
Whether it's 20 minimum is the acreage, or it's 50 an acre. What you're going to end up, what's happening now is you're getting landowners, adjoining landowners, that's coming together And we have many examples of that recently that are now building mega complexes.
Correct.
Where you could have had an individual family, mention the Berettas specifically. They're sitting on 12 acres. They were ready to come in with a small boutique project to help fund their nonprofit organization.
Yep.
But were forced to go to the adjoining landowner, acquire them. Now it's become double the size of what they actually wanted to do there. So what we're doing when we increase the floor for the minimum acreage, you're actually increasing the number of units, whether that's townhomes or whether that's apartment complexes. But you're not going to stop it from happening. So you're just going to force larger developments in a smaller, more concentrated area that's going to have a bigger effect. That's my personal opinion. I wish Andy Barlow was here. I'm not sure where he's at, but I'll address that later with him. But you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So you're just going to force the behavior. And I don't know if increasing the minimum acreage is the right answer, or actually putting a cap. If we're trying to slow down growth and stop all of these larger developments coming in, should we not be considering the opposite? Should we not be looking at putting a maximum ceiling in terms of acreage? I don't even know if that's legally can be done or not, but so that's just my 2 cents. Whether it's right or wrong, it's my opinion, and I reserve the right to have one. So,
Commissioner, I would say, once you start going to, I mean, there's a happy medium in there to where you can balance what you're wanting out of a development. At certain points, you can get a development so small, and we saw it, I think, with Hibbett Station coming through here, where the commission was asking for certain amenities, and there was no way a development that side could support those type of amenities. So we do reach a point where we get them so small that we can't provide the amenities, and that comes back on the taxpayers to provide those amenities if they're not being provided there by the developments on those things. So, you know, in one way you can look at it, it's like you have a development now, it's 20 acres, which is twice the size of 10 acres. But if you get a 20-acre development in there, you're able to, a lot of times, pay for a bigger amenity package than you would at 2 10-acre developments by themselves. In the end, you accomplish the same thing. And I mean, I think to your point, you're going to get some of this no matter how you cut this. It's just a question of what's best for balancing the level of life that we have here in Mount Juliet, protecting those that live here existingly, and balancing the growth on these things. So it's coming one way or the other, and to a certain degree. We've got the land use plan in place, and I think it's already been pointed out that we strongly dislike doing individual edits by lot, but you do see it take place. So that's always an option that can happen. But I guess the point of this meeting was, to talk about whether we want to change it back to a minimum of, or get rid of the minimum. I'm not really sure exactly what we were driving at on this, but I guess for me, since this has been changed almost a year now, I kind of wonder what we missed out on in a year, and I really don't know that we have missed out on a whole lot. I've had people call me about lots, and I've been happy to tell them that it didn't meet the minimum, because it really saved everybody a lot of time on this. Staff going through a project that was never going to fly. It saved the planning commission time. It saved the board of commissioners who made it that far. It saved a lot of people a lot of time on a lot of places. And the reason they're small lots, they were roads and areas that just weren't going to ever support that development, whether it been 10, 5, 20, or whatever. But I'll let you carry on that. That's just my 2 cents. I think we got about 10 minutes left here on this meeting.
okay. I'm going to ask Mr. Robinson, a local developer, Mount Juliet, if he wouldn't mind saying a few words here, and then finally I'll wrap up with Matt Gardner, Administration.
Bill Robinson. I'll make it short and sweet. I too want what's best for Mount Juliet, and I think there's probably some situations where we have some 10-acre tracts that probably would be good for townhomes and some, your older people that would like to get into them, and I think there's certainly a place for it. I'd like to see a commercial PUD where you had some apartments over it like they have in Franklin, where you could come down, shop, and go back up and walk to the railroad track, stuff like that. Of course, we own some land close to that, so obviously I have a personal interest in that. But other than that, I'd like to see Mount Juliet have some of these pockets developed where we're talking about 50 pockets here, there are probably very, very few of those that would actually qualify to be developed. You know, when you look at the land use plan and the surrounding areas of RS 40 and things like that, there are a lot of them that would never be approved anyway. But, you know, I think in the right situation, you know, an RM8 would be a good situation. So I too would agree with whatever you guys decide on, but just want to give you my opinion. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I make some comments before we run out of time? I know you have,
Do you mind
Do
if I
I-
let
Okay,
the
sure.
speaker come in and then we
Yeah.
can?
Afternoon, Matt Gardner. Scott asked me to, Commissioner Hefner asked me to come and speak kind of more specifically on the economics of doing rental apartments on RM8 on 10 acres. And, you know, anything's possible, but the math makes that more challenging versus a townhouse or a for sale product. And it really comes down to efficiency, more operational efficiency. You know, there is definitely construction efficiency. You know, as we all know, when you start buying things in bulk, it becomes cheaper on a per, you know, window, door basis. But the big part of it is an operational efficiency key. You know, on an apartment complex specifically, your biggest ongoing operational expense is staff. You know, you've got both leasing staff and maintenance staff. We did Vintage Station North. We have one full-time, one part-time maintenance staff person. If this was the 80-unit project that could go on a 10-acre RM8 zoned apartment complex, we'd still have to have that same staff, just a lot less revenue to pay for them, because you know, the full-time person needs nights, weekends, vacations, and people's air conditioners and water heaters and stuff still break. And because of that, from a standard apartment standpoint, the rule of thumb has become somewhat, almost not even a rule of thumb, but a rule that apartments like to be over 200 units. And so then you're going back to a 20-acre RM16 or something denser that is kind of more of a special circumstance like Vintage Station North, which by just as reference, we're 31.6 units per acre at Station North. Because that allows for those operational efficiencies to really be maximized at above 200 units. So the staff it requires to operate a 200 unit and 120 unit is the same. And so the institutional buyers for developers, you know, we're develop and hold. Most developers are not. So the folks that are wanting to sell, they're wanting to sell to the big buyers, the REITs, the pension funds, all of those, unless you're in New York City or, you know, it's Washington, D.C. or something special like that. But, you know, even your big Atlanta, Charlotte, Nashville, Austin, all of those cities, they have to get special permission to go below 200 units. And so the more buyers you have, the better your price is for that, you know, value proposition for the developer. They like the bigger deals. You know, there's always exceptions. There's always, you know, somebody who owns some land and is bound to manage it themselves and do it themselves. You know, it's possible. Everything's always possible. But I think seeing the projects that Mount Juliet has approved, they tend to, you know, that has to come through the PUD process. They tend to be the more professionally managed ones, and you know, the commission, I think, can see that. So really, when it comes down to that operational efficiency, and I'm trying to go quickly and skim my notes, you know, it does come down to the bigger projects from an apartment standpoint, hits that operational efficiency. It does maximize that cost to the developer. And, you know, RM8, that's just not a lot of units on a big A project for apartments. So you're going to end up having lots of open space because those apartments, you want to keep them pretty tightly packed in together. So, any questions? I skipped a couple of things because I wanted to have some time. Yes, sir.
If I can just real quick, which, by the way, thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight and for the folks that did speak. So Mr. Robinson did bring up a good point, which would be the commercial PUD. Obviously, with your market, with Vintage Station, do you see, you know, if it was to look, you know, if the city would to look at like a multi, you know, tenant, you know, apartments up top, business on, you know, below. I really like that concept, by the way, because that was where I came from a little bit, and it was starting to pick up. Mm-hmm. And it's more modern, I think, for those youths that are trying to come up from downtown.
Absolutely.
To back here. but at the same time, those are more apartments versus townhomes or condos, but you're still seeing some of those markets hit. I mean, do you still being able to see that 425 or lower for those?
On a rental, it is all about the amenities, and we find from a rent standpoint, I don't do for sale product. I have, but it's been 15 years, so I don't want to say I have current market knowledge. But from a rental standpoint, we absolutely, and I'm a big proponent of the fully integrated mixed use, retail, office, multifamily, all as part of one project. We see that people are willing to pay more rent for it. It costs more, but it also, people are willing to pay more rent for it, and that does go back to a demographics question. I know that somebody mentioned before your first-time home buyers and your, I think it was step down, the empty nesters. I don't know that that's a legal term to use, but they like that vibrancy. If you've got small kids, the last thing you want is a restaurant that might be loud when that baby's trying to sleep. So we see it at Station North, just with the Red Bicycle Coffee Shop. I mean, that's obviously not a bar or a really even a restaurant, but our tenant mix does tend to be I don't know about our competition. I know that our children per unit is very, very, very low. So to your comment about the school impact, we pay our $5,000 per unit impact fee, thank you, to the county for the schools. And, we have a much lower number of head count that are going into the school system than I think a similar product might be if it were single family or something that is kind of targeted more for that. So we believe that, to answer your question in a long way.
Thank you.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate your time.
Okay. I like work sessions. I want to see more of them. One thing I don't like about them, they're never long enough. And we have public here that were invited to come and speak as well, and they're not going to be able to speak evidently because there's not going to be enough time. I was here last October when the 20-acre minimum was passed 4-1. I voted on it because I felt it was good policy, and I stand by it. I don't question the intentions to provide affordable housings to people for places to live. I don't question intentions of providing opportunities for local developers. I do question, however, the vision. My concern has more to do with the future. I'm concerned about the future and where this could potentially lead 5, 10, 15 years down the road. This is about a direction, in my opinion. Which direction is best for the city? Does the city need more high density, specifically massive amounts? I don't think, Travis, can you put up that map? I don't think the majority of the citizens support massive expansion of multifamily. That is this map here. It's citywide. The bottom line question would be, what is the motivating factor for this reduction? That's the million-dollar question. This, to me, seems more focused on development. I don't have time to go through all of that. Now, in all fairness, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm opposed to multifamily because all cities and communities need multifamily complexes. There are plenty of people who choose to live in townhomes and apartments, and that's great. And I agree that a handful of these tracts would be better suited for townhomes and or apartments because of the location. There's several examples. I'm not going to have time. But again, this is a visual citywide, and I do think it's about the future. Smaller tracts of townhomes all over the city aren't going to bring significant road improvements, sidewalks, signals, or amenities. The tracts are small. 10% of each tract has to be green space, which leaves minimal space for anything but maybe barbecue grills and a playground by the time you add parking. If this reduction gets approved starting again in January, which is when it will be back, the door opens to any and all of these 60 tracts seeking multifamily developments. Not that they're all for sale, but if this were to pass, and the landowner chooses to develop, it's just a massive expansion of multifamily all across the city. So, and the majority of these, there's 60 of these 10-plus acre tracts that are vacant. The majority, over 45 of them, are in residential, and most all of those are low-density residential, which is RS40. It's low density. So, again, a handful at the cost of what others surrounded by low-density single-family homes is not worth the risk, in my opinion. I think that is a very risky direction to take the city. Overwhelmingly, the calls that I have received are opposed to reducing the 20-acre minimum. I have a lot more to say, but I know we're crunched on time, so that's all I'm going to say for now.
Any last words?
No, I just appreciate everybody coming out, and this is exactly what I wanted to accomplish: open dialogue, discussion, education. Everyone will be able to vote come January. So thank you all. Appreciate it. And I apologize. I was not aware that there were individuals that wanted to get up and speak. Happy to host another one before January to allow the citizens that came out to speak. Happy to set up a second one so you have the opportunity to do so. So I apologize. That was an oversight on my part.
Commissioner, I'll say typically we don't take citizen comments during workshops, but anyone here who wishes to address the Board of Commissioners, we do open the floor up at 6:30 in the regular meeting for comments, and anybody can speak on any topic they want. You can be recognized for 3 minutes, and you're welcome to stay and attend.
Isn't it published that the public is invited to come and speak?
I think it's published. The public is invited to attend, I think was the wording, but
I can't hear you.
There's a copy of the public notice.
Oh, okay.
Chamber, and it's
attend.
what we do with work sessions.
All right, without that, we will be adjourned. We have a